Welcome everybody to episode 44? 44? Yeah, 44
That's what it says anyway.
of the Unchained Vodcast.
Which one?
Today we're going to talk about keeping combatants engaged. Specifically, how do you keep people active engaged in different types of battles? Obviously, there's always going to be some issue in that with, say, melee combatants in siege warfare and ranged combatants in keep melees, which will be two of our main topics here. But what sort of things can they do in Camelot Unchained to keep that from being absolutely horrible, as it has been in some games? So, to kind of start us off, since we've had kind of a long pre-talk, and obviously, at this point, I already know how you're doing today.
Yeah.
We'll just get right into it. For you and chat as well, can you think of any times in specific games as such where this has been a particular problem for you, where you've felt kind of either useless or bored because you can't really do what you want to be doing with your character?
Yes.
Very, very much so. Not to the point where I'm bored, but to the point where I'm possibly repetitively dying over and over again, smacking up against a wall of AoE and
Oh, God.
particle lag, and yeah.
For me, it was when I was playing tanks. The few times I've actually had the bad idea of playing tanks in PvP, and where I basically felt like I was running around chasing people and not doing anything else. Which is why I hate people playing tank in PvP. And
I don't think WoW
CU
counts
gets
for
out
being
of that.
bored.
Yeah.
That's WoW all the time. Being able to solo a group with a healer, yeah, that would be bad. For me, I haven't had too bad of an issue in most games I've played, actually. Though I did have a bit of issue in Warhammer. I mainly played a sorceress in Warhammer. I think that's what they were called in there. And which very, long range damage mage, very glass cannony, very fun to play when you could shoot people with your spells. The problem I always had was when it got into the keep battles themselves, the keep melee. Well, it wasn't even stun lock. It was that, I couldn't get in the front. Again, glass cannon. I can't get in the front of the fight to shoot people with my spells. So I'd get like one spell off, and then either we were just ground to a halt and all dying, or we were winning and I'd get like a spell off, and then we're rushing into another chamber. And like a spell off, and we're rushing into another chamber. So I'm like, I want to cast. I want to cast. Quit moving.
That's why
kind of felt like that a lot of the time.
To cast while moving.
It also felt like that a lot of the time in TISO. The thing in TISO is like everybody just says screw it, we're AoEing all day long, and everyone would just run in a giant mob and go psh, psh, psh. Yeah. And that's just what every freaking keep fight felt like, was people just running in, spamming AoEs, going to hell with it.
Yeah. And with me, that was when I was with the scout groups that we had, where at some point I was like, everybody's at the same place. Try to take other keeps. We were roaming the map, trying to find enemies and finding nobody. They were all in one keep, going as a Zerg from one keep to the other, and there was nobody to try and find.
Couldn't have a small fight.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. No. Skirmishes were really not a thing in TISO.
No, and that was one of the main things I really wanted them to push. It was one of the things they said they were going to be pushing by making all these other objectives and things important. And were they? No, not even slightly. All the little farms and everything, you're like, I'm not taking that. I mean, it was kind of important for points, but you just about might as well take the keep and then go over there and take them as a Zerg instead of bothering to do anything else. Maybe roll through one on your way to the keep. But let's see what we got here in chat. Short range characters definitely can be an issue in sieges, and that's going to be our next main topic, really. Yeah, range doesn't usually have as much of a problem with this.
No, because
I think for range the problem is more in being effective than not having anything to do.
Yeah.
At certain times. But so let's
For,
move.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. No, keep
I
going.
was just going to say, let's move into that topic of talking about ranged battles. Let's actually get into ranged battles, I think, because I think that's where the most prominent issue is, the most obvious issue is you have melee fighters, and you're doing a siege battle. You're sieging a keep with long-range mazes and archers and catapults and trebuchets, and the fighter is doing what?
Meat shield, basically.
You're talking about the fighter on the same team as
like the
people who
fighter
are assaulting?
attacking
Both
both really,
really.
But on either side,
Well,
what is the fighter going to do to keep from just standing there waiting?
Right. I think what needs to happen and where it hasn't happened in other games is there needs to be a very strong incentive on the defenders dealing with siege weapons by sending groups out to destroy them. And once that happens, your melee characters are then tasked with defending them.
Yeah, Rhaegar.
Especially since mages are supposed to be artillery.
Yeah,
At least on our side, with the Arthurians, our big spells are basically siege spells. The big fireballs and things like that are not meant to be 1v1 spells. They're AoEs to take down walls and to take down defenders in keeps. So that's already an incentive to take people out of the keep and attacking. But yeah, that means that brings work for both attacking and defending melee characters.
And Rhaegar brings up an important point as well, is the defending of other players. One, because there are, of course, stealthers who will love to come in and kill the mages, kill the catapults, kill the healers, and so the fighters do need to be around and watching for those in some capacity. But one, standing around waiting for a stealther to pop out can be kind of boring. They do, however, have to watch out for range shots, and since the game has active blocking, that at least adds a little bit of interest there, because you're sitting there waiting for the range shot to come in. You can move in front of it and be like, shield. That doesn't really help the melee fighters who don't have shields, but for the ones that are going more tanky, they can actively move around and intercept attacks from distance.
Yeah, and even if they, as I said, meat shield, the fact that all projectiles are physics-based and that you can actually body block an attack gives heavy fighters something to do. And even then, even some melee characters that may not find a use at that moment for their abilities have still a use to protect the ones who are actually doing damage.
And that's the sort of thing that can really help for the march as well. You know, we've got the long march through range fire, and some people have been concerned about that. How do the fighters get into close range against ranged people? You know, the active blocking and everything can add some interest there. But as Sekrix just mentioned, siege towers and ladders, they actually mentioned this in the announcement for the heavy fighter, the Q&A and everything, talking about having either some ways to climb or some ways to put up ladders and other types of siege like that heavy fighters could use to actively attack the keep as well, which would I don't imagine you can easily open with that, but that's something that's at least a viable option to involve into the fight at some point.
Definitely.
Not just for heavy tanks either. All melee units.
And yeah, the pocket. This one in this game, they're actually going to be meat shields, quite literally.
But remember, heavy fighter is not a tank.
No, that's what I like. Also, is
can be,
you
but it's not necessarily
be a tank, but you're a heavy fighter. You can play a role of a tank, but that's not your main use. Because in PvP, we discussed that before they released the classes, actually. We talked about the fact that in PvP, tanks, 99.99% of the time, tanks are useless in PvP, if only because of the time to kill, and of the fact that in the vast majority of games, tanks cannot actually perform their tank role. to protect
Yeah.
their teammates.
How do you force somebody to hit you? I mean,
Yeah.
unless you're dangerous. And then if he's tanky and dangerous, he's overpowered compared to everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. I like Lineage 2, where there was the taunt ability in PvP, hard forced. Depending, it was like a save roll kind of. It was not 100% chance, but you could force the player's targeting to yourself rather than their actual target if your taunt worked.
I can
But it
understand
is
why they
pretty
don't want to
extreme.
do that, though.
Yeah, it is pretty extreme.
Because it's pretty annoying, especially when there's in a mass battle like that, when there's
Yeah.
tons of people and someone switches your aim over here. It's kind of hard to. It may be hard to get it back, and so I can understand why that's pretty rough. Odovic, that's kind of the key topic here. Is eventually standing there, even actively blocking, that's probably getting boring. So they do need other things to do. Being able to guard up and move up ladders, to climb the walls, I think is viable. Another thing they mentioned in the class reveal for the heavy fighter was if crafters can set traps, and the defenders can help go out with them and set traps and things to slow the advance towards the wall. Also, if crafters can set some kind of bombs or sapper type things against walls, then heavy fighters can escort them, up to the walls and everything to help do damage and bring the walls down, which is, I think, potentially a really good idea. I know they don't want to really put in definitely not cannons, and so bombs get kind of close to that. But it could be a magical bomb.
It's not exactly the same.
Not exactly the
you
same.
have to set it against the wall, so you have to put yourself in danger.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that most heavy fighter classes have, and that has been the problem in most games for tanks, is gap closers. Most classes have gap closers that allow you at least some sort of mobility, so you don't just run around trying to chase ranged or DPS that have more mobility than you, and where you can't do anything.
Now, Brand, what do you think about another idea they had mentioned in their class reveal, which is tanks just walking up to literally be meat shields and find traps?
To find, to be the...
just to walk up and go, where's the caltrops at? Ow, ow, ow.
I mean, it's not as fun, I'd say, as other
I'd hate
things,
doing that.
but it's certainly something to get them going, and if they have a healer following them, it'll work.
See you, Minesweeper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did they say what?
About the heavy fighters?
I don't know. Sacker said, where did they say this? But I don't know what he's asking about, where they said what at. So,
yeah, no. I think from melee, to be fair, most melee characters have some sort of mobility. So there will be melee fight. You can't have... if you want to save your keep, especially... Right now we're talking about sieges, but to save your keep, rather than letting them pummel your keep while you're staying behind the walls, you will have to go out. And then that becomes a melee fight, not a ranged fight. So first, the casting time for the casters will make it so that you're not just bombarded constantly as you approach the attacking lines, and then you have just the mobility of the characters that will go and attack the siegers, because you can't stay just behind your walls and waiting for them to just break through. And
I think that's where the incentive and the balance of things really needs to be there. If it's too easy to destroy siege weapons from ranged, then melees are gonna... What's the point of even going out there if you can just stand on your wall and shoot?
I suspect you're gonna have to go there,
right?
Especially because I think it's it seems likely to me that crafters will be able to repair siege. Because again, we have to remember, in ranged combat, heavy fighters aren't the only ones that are possibly bored. Crafters need something to do as well. Certainly, they can ban a siege weapon, but also if they can repair the siege weapon, if they have maybe some types of small defenses and things they could build, a little bitty wall or something they can put up over time so you can shoot from behind it or something like that. That would give them, as well as traps, of course, and possibly something that they can use against walls and things to help destroy them. That gives them things to do. And if you can shoot a siege turret, but there's crafters back there hammering away at it, repairing it, you're going to need to get some substantial firepower on it instead of just, but...
And that's where the defense comes in, the melee defense goes in to try to get rid of them, and then you're assaulting melee, are defending them, and then you have, hopefully, a decent battle.
But as my idea here puts out, I mean, they can't just easily repair siege either, and that is kind of a problem because if mages are some of the longest range characters in the game, so if they can just really easily shoot up and over and into siege, they bypass heavy fighters, they bypass everything, they can potentially out damage the repair, and I'd assume they probably could if you've got more than one, mage shooting at it. So really, I would think the siege weapons need to be even longer range, depending on the siege weapon you're using. Probably depending entirely on the siege weapon you're using. Maybe like a trebuchet or something would have to be even longer range than a mage. Otherwise, they're going to kill every siege weapon that gets in range.
I suspect there's going to be different ranges. The Scorpion will have to be pretty close by.
Yeah.
A trebuchet will have to be very long because you can't adjust... you can fine-tune the range of a trebuchet. You can kind of adjust where it's going, but you can't say it's going to be 100 feet or 200 feet, the distance it's going to throw. It has a certain range, an average range, that you can modify, but for the most part, trebuchets will have to be really far off, which means they're going to be only useful to attack walls or to throw stuff in the keep, but you can't target players with a trebuchet.
And one
you can't
thing
target players with a lot of the siege engines. So that makes one of the problems of siege battles disappear right there. Because, you have some siege engines where you can throw, say, a jar of oil that you can set in fire or things like that. But for the most part, the siege engines are designed for that. Siege, meaning attacking walls. So the players can still move around those kind of really slow-moving, heavy damage, but slow-moving projectiles.
That actually...
So melees will still be able to get out and fight.
Yeah, that actually brings up an idea that I hadn't really considered before, is that some of the really big siege battles, and I mean, let's be honest here, most siege battles, especially early in the game against small keeps and things, probably aren't going to be these big, epic, super long-ranged affairs, because the keeps aren't that strong yet. But against like really build-up keeps and everything, I could actually see the ranged portion of that being at different stages of range. So you've got really long-range siege with perhaps a couple of defenders at the farthest range, but then you've got your main battle group halfway up the field where the mages and archers and things can actually shoot the keep because they can't quite reach from back at trebuchet range. Because if they could, then everybody would just stay way super far back and you can't really shoot at each other.
And there's no interest in that,
There's just people sitting there waiting for the wall to come down.
And we don't want a PV door. That's the main thing, is how do we get away from PV door where you're just blasting the door all day?
That's actually pretty easy. Because trebuchets, because all siege engines will first either need to be built on site or take a long ass time to get brought to the site. And then you need ammo. Those take a lot of resources and a lot of weight. So you won't be able to fire for 5 hours and pummel the walls like that, because you're going to run unless you have a real caravan bringing you resources regularly to keep firing those things. You're going to run out of resources. So it will need to be used very strategically. like focused on one point to break one wall to get inside the keep to fight the defenders, because they didn't give us an exact idea of how you're going to capture a keep, but I suspect you're going to have to go inside and capture it. So there will be work for melees, if only for that. They're actually going to do the actual capturing. The rest of the range are going to make them wait for that.
Yeah, the one thing I will say though is it's still there are a number of things we can do. The only thing there's only two things out of all those ideas that really feel to me like they're things that would really keep heavy fighters actually very interested and engaged in any kind of longer siege that's more than like just 10 minutes of sieging, which is escorting crafters or some sort of sapper or something to the walls to try to lay traps, or maybe some type of a device or something that would damage the walls, or siege towers and siege ladders and things so that they can climb up on the walls and actually do melee fight in amongst everything else. The rest of that, blocking people, guarding. First of all, the stealthers are really the counter stealth. So you can't really have heavy fighters just standing around waiting for stealthers to pop out because they're staring at nothing. You certainly want some of them blocking the healers from ranged attacks and things, but again, ranged units can shoot up and over and everything, so how good are they really going to be at that? So there's always going to be some level of issue with that. There's nothing you can do to completely get rid of that. And for defenders, they don't have the siege towers or the siege ladders. They have to get out of the keep and go out and engage. But then you have this problem of how do they get back to the battle when they die, which of course we have no idea what resurrection is going to look like.
Yeah, we don't.
I just really, really do not want them respawning inside the keep. But if they don't respawn inside the keep, why would anyone leave to go fight in the field? Because they're going to die. They know they're going to die.
Yeah.
There's a lot of balancing that needs to happen.
Yeah, the resing part is going to be a big issue, but it doesn't change what you can do as a melee. Even then, like, if the defenders don't spawn in the keep, you're going to need fighters, melee, and range to fight your way through to get back in to defend your keep, or just stay out and fight. But I think one thing also we kind of forget most of the time, because we don't have the experience of that, is the casting time will not be instant for most of them. And same for archers. You're going to have a certain amount of arrows on you, where you can't just spam your arrows without aiming, without anything, just hoping to hit somebody.
That means you have to make all of your resources count.
Yes.
You can't just stand on the wall and fire.
Compared to the defendants that have their resources at hand, where you have to bring them.
And that's also a reason why, I mean, again, I know we don't know anything about how resurrection and respawn works, but that's a reason why you really, I feel like you can't have the respawn inside the keep. Because if you can, all those arrows that the archers shoot, they're wasted. I mean, people respawn, and they're eventually going to run out of arrows, so they can't just keep sieging and try to reduce the keep's resources, because they're going to run out of resources before the keep ever runs out.
And I think that's part of the point why siege weapons are in the game, really, and being used, is that's their purpose. You don't want to shoot arrows at a wall. You don't want to shoot a fireball at a wall. You could. That might be at least more useful than shooting an arrow at it. But if you want to take a wall down, you hop on a siege weapon.
Yeah. And Rahalden, MJ didn't say that precisely. He said that there might be a possibility for the defenders to res in the keep, but that also that might be one of the uses of the scouts to put out engines or abilities that prevent people from resing in the keep. So right now we don't know anything, so we can't really even speculate on that. There's not even.
He does his best to avoid confirming anything
speculate on it. But,
Most of the time, he won't even comment on it.
No comments.
And I think one of the ways also, and that's a very hotly debated topic as well, to make the combatants more engaged than they are in most game, is the time to kill. The moment you step out of the keep, you die within a second or half a second. There is no incentive to go out. If the time to kill is long enough that you have time to withdraw and get healed and get back into the fight, there is an incentive to go out because you disrupt a lot more by going to the attackers rather than waiting. So the time to kill is probably going to be also a big factor in keeping fighters engaged in those kind of battles.
Yeah, and I know this, as you said, this is a controversial issue, and it's one that I'm on the far end of the spectrum. I want a really long time to kill when you have healers present, because that case right there, if you have attackers and their melee group wants to escort someone to the wall to plant like a bomb or whatever a crafter might have, potentially to damage a wall, are they going to do that if they're going to get killed every single time they try it? No. But if they can walk up there, take several shots, get back and get healed, then it's worth doing it. But if they're guaranteed to just die on the march there every single time, given that they're probably going to have to walk all the way back from wherever they respawn, I mean, that's terrible. No one's going to want to do that. It's like, when somebody escort me to the keep wall, you can go screw yourself. No.
And let's be honest.
Good luck.
This is an MMO. It's not an FPS. We don't need a 2 shots time to kill.
No.
It makes the game boring. Even more so than not having anything to do. If you take 2 steps and die, I don't want to play, to be honest. If it takes 10, 15, I don't know, I'm not a game designer, but 15, 20 seconds to die, to like, I don't know, 1 kill headshot, no.
Yeah, Raholden use a bubble because people love bubble classes. That doesn't cause any raging at all.
No.
I used to play a paladin in WoW. I got cussed out so often. Just run into a freaking PvP and they're all like, "We're gonna kill you," and there's like, "Bah, no, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not."
And
God, people hated that.
That's one of the bullshit arguments, actually, Sacrex. About the time to kill that I've seen on the forums multiple times, about the reaction time and the Twitch gameplay and the things like that. That's good for FPSs. They're not making an FPS.
MMOs are not supposed to be Twitch games. I mean,
yes, exactly. So no, it has nothing to do with the reaction time, and especially with short time to kill. Your healers don't have time to heal you. So you need to have a longer time to kill for the healers to be able, especially with physics-based healing. You need the healers to be able to target you and have the time to heal you at least once.
yeah. I mean, obviously, we're not talking about it taking a full minute to kill somebody. That would be kind of crazy. But if you're standing there, you're fighting 1-on-1, then I like for it to take at least maybe 10 to 14 seconds to drop somebody, so that you have time to go. Okay, I've got a rogue here stabbing me in the chest. I want to use this button and do this attack to do things. Or I see they're using this attack. I have at least a second to realize what gear he has and what abilities I need to use on him, instead of just, he stabbed me, I'm stun locked, I can't move, I'm dead. Because that's how I feel like in half a game. It's just, by the time you realize what you're even fighting, if they've got the jump on you, you're basically dead at that point, and it doesn't matter.
That, and the fact that you're going to have to figure out in the world a lot more than in most games what's happening. You need to be able to see the battlefield and what people are doing to be able to counter that. So it's not even 4 or 6 large hits like Sacrex said, but I don't want, unless there's a very small chance of critical hit, I don't want anything that does more than, say, 1/5 of your health in 1 hit.
And one thing I noticed that they've talked about is with the blocking. You have active blocking, of course, for heavy fighters, but then you also have this deflection rating based on your weapon that just happens automatically to deflect a certain percentage of damage. And I feel like a good part of the purpose for that is to stop people from getting one-shotted by range, to stop like an archer like me from standing at really long range and going, I'm gonna snipe your face off. I'm doing slow attack, poison, super headshot attack that I've built up, and then I shoot it and you get hit and you just drop in the field. But they have this deflection, so it's like instead it's like bling, immediately 40% off the damage. And now if I've got 3 other archers shooting you, sure, yeah, you're probably gonna die anyway. Yeah. But it's really hard.
Focus fire. So yeah.
Yeah, it's real. I mean, obviously there's not a lot they could do about focus fire. That's what good groups are going to do. They're going to go, everyone kill this guy, and so on and so forth. But 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 and stuff, I don't want to see people instantly getting dropped. Or even though I want to be like a sniper archer, I don't want to see people getting immediately one-shotted by me because it's not an FPS. In an FPS game, if I'm playing that kind of range shot, hell yeah, if I shoot somebody in the head, I want them to die immediately.
And when they don't, you rage.
Anyway, we're kind of getting off topic a little bit.
A little bit.
Is there any other issues that somebody wanted to bring up for ranged combat, for like siege battles and things of that nature?
Yeah. Range typically in MMOs has had the best and most use of AoE spells. And an issue in at least SWTOR I saw a lot was in any kind of large-scale combat, you want to make the most use of your damage as possible. So everyone resorted to using AoE spells, and you'd have 15, 20 people, if it was an open world engagement, just spamming their AoEs in one spot. You couldn't do anything as a melee character, and I really hope they address, and some of the stuff we've talked about may even help towards that, address the ability for a melee character to go into a group, not just alone, hopefully, dear Lord, that would be stupid. But for a group to push, not as a Zerg, but as a coordinated group with melee characters, and those characters feel like they don't have to sit back behind healers or behind range because they can't do anything.
Well, I do think there are a couple things that they can do with this game to help combat the AoE game. The first one is, of course, just player collision. Players can't stand literally on top of each other, and that's immediately a huge counter that weakens AoE, because you had that in TISO. People could just like stand right up into each other. You're immediately hitting like 15 people. It's ridiculous. Or people could stand in each other and AoE at the same time from their own bodies. In this, you're going to have people trying to cast AoE spells. They're going to hit their own players. They're going to hit the people at the front of the other enemies and stuff. So it's going to go off at the front. It's not necessarily going to penetrate through everybody. They can also have AoE stay relatively small. That's one thing that they love to do in like TISO is big AoEs. Everyone's shooting these huge AoE attacks that hits like an entire group. But why? If I shoot a fire arrow or an explosive arrow, why should it have more than like a 2 or 3 foot AoE span? I can hit 2 or 3 people maybe, but I really shouldn't be hitting an entire group with an arrow. Arrows can't carry that big of explosives. That's ridiculous. Same thing for a mage. Why should a single mage necessarily shoot a fireball that encompasses everyone? Now, I'm not saying he can't, because we can create spells. So maybe you can make a longer casting one that does a big AoE, but you don't necessarily need the majority of your AoEs to be large radius AoE attacks.
Yeah. One thing I strongly disagree with Sacrex and We Shall Survive is that the collision has nothing to do with the non-stacking of people. It's the fact that everything is physics-based that will spread out the combat a lot more than in any other game. Because if you're an archer or if you're a mage and you have 50 of your friends in front of you, you won't be able to cast without hitting them and then doing nothing, wasting your mana, your arrows, everything. So the fight will be a lot more spread out because people will avoid blocking the line of sight of their allies. So I suspect that AoEs will be less effective also because of that, because you won't have everybody bunching up in a Zerg ball, because Zerg ball will be useless because all you're gonna hit is your friends or your group members, and you're not going to be doing any damage to them, but you're not going to be doing any damage to the enemies. If your fireball hits your heavy fighters that are right in front of you, it's not going to damage him, but it's not going to go all the way to your enemy and doing damage to them.
Yeah, and Rahal, that's at least one thing they have confirmed is no friendly fire. So
No.
We definitely don't want AoEs hitting our own players. That would be bad. But like my idea here said, the spells are counterbalanced as you make them. So you can possibly make ones that have a big AoE but do much less damage versus ones with a smaller AoE that actually do decent damage on them, which incentivizes you to still use tactics when you throw a flaming AoE attack or something. Instead of just lobbing these huge aura spells and things.
Right. Yeah, and then the only other thing that's ever really posed a problem with large AoEs and particles is already being addressed in the server stability and their ability to have such large fights, 1,000 plus people or 1,000 people on each side. They've pushed it to like 2,700 at some point a couple weeks ago. I think that was roughly the number. So that's not an issue. It's easier for people like Melee to go in and not be bogged down with lag by the sheer amount of AoE and particles and people going on.
Yeah,
so
the other thing that I think will help with the AoE is healers. They've said healers are, when left alone, essentially the most powerful class. They are absolutely nightmares if they're left alone and not killed. So if all you're doing is AoEing the people in the front of the group, their healer's going to be in the back, counter AoE healing them, as you're AoEing, DPSing, I should say. The healer's going to be in the back doing AoE heals, and you're not going to do anything. The game is based so that you have wounds and a wound system, at least at present anyway. It's basically you have a wound system and you have targeting for body parts and everything. AoEs obviously aren't going to target body parts. That would be stupid. So, I'm assuming they're not, because that would be stupid. So you're just doing damage in general to the whole body. Well, healers, that's going to be the easiest type of healing to do. It's just AoE healing and going, I can just do this all day, whatever. I don't have to worry about healing wounds or body parts.
Throw my potion.
Yeah.
Just keep throwing my potion.
All day long.
I'm throwing the whole cauldron in at this point.
Well, if we can here, let's move on to the ranged people. As we've said, they don't have as much of a problem with this type of issue, because you can almost always at least shoot a ranged attack, but how effective is it? And so, how do you keep archers and mages useful when you get into those keep melees, when you get inside the keep, or if you're going through like smaller tunnels in the depths?
That's
how do you...
the interesting part, because this is going to be one of the first games where that's an issue for them.
Yeah.
Where their projectiles aren't just going to go through a sprite image of a person in front of you. They're going to collide with anything that it hits first.
There's this insta-cast stuff.
At that point, they almost become useless, like we're talking about.
And in a way, it's not so bad, because if ranges... I like the idea of all classes being situational, and that in close quarters, melee is more useful than range. Because in open field, range is more useful than melee. So I like the idea that all environments have different needs. If you fight in the middle of the forest, a huge AoE mage is not going to be super useful, but a ranged archer and melee fighters are going to be more useful. Yeah. In open field, where you can throw fireballs from 1,000 feet away to a group that is attacking you, archers can still be useful, but mages are a lot more useful. And melee, aside from being meat shields, are not very useful. So in close quarters, I'm fine with, since I'm going to either play an archer or a mage in terms of combatant, I'm okay with being not that useful. Well, maybe not completely useless, but at least not that useful in close quarters.
Yeah, and since we're talking about ways to prevent that from happening, an idea might be that there is a component that you can unlock that allows your spells or your projectiles to bounce off of things rather than collide and destroy with some other
I do
consequence
not
to it.
want Hanzo in CU.
With some other consequence
grenades,
to
grenade spell.
Or Junkrat
I'd be
and
pretty down with that. That'd
Hanzo
be
in
interesting.
CU.
it.
I'd be down with a grenade spell. Yeah.
Maybe not all spells or all types of spells, like a fireball with
Mhm.
that component probably wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But if it made sense, if there was a type of spell or an element that it made sense to do that with, and you could make that spell to bounce off a wall in this very small tunnel, you don't control where it goes after that point, obviously, and you can only hope for the best. But
Yeah.
maybe damage
That-
reduction after
that
it bounces
does-
the first time.
Or a melee ranged style of spell.
Yeah,
Like
that
you
essentially
have
brings up customization of spells, of abilities,
Yes.
which we can do.
Exactly.
You can't really make, I don't think you'll be able to make insta-cast spells,
No,
but you can make shorter cast time spells. So you have quick one-off
Yeah.
fireball to go poo and have at least some utility.
that or like for us a fire touch. If somebody comes in melee range, it's gonna do a lot less damage than your range attacks. But
Hmm.
on melee range, being able to just kind of a melee attack with a fire component. That
Yeah, the
does
main
some
problem for
damage.
that is how squishy the mages are.
Yeah.
And archers and stuff, and you don't want to push in front of the fighters because they need to be in front. So if you can't even get into melee range, then at that
Yeah.
point, how do you shoot spells because there's people in front of you,
Well,
and how do you
it's
get
a
ahead to do the touch
self-preservation
attack?
point. At this point,
Um,
it's a defense and self-preservation. But yeah, the spells and arrows that can bounce off, or just lobbing grenades for crafters maybe, or just
mhm.
spells
Now,
that
one
bounce is kind of a touchy
Maybe.
subject.
Yeah. Well, one thing
Kinda.
I really wanted to ask about, because I couldn't come up with a really good answer for this, but I feel like there would be potential here for this, is how would the air system actually come into play in like Keep Melee, where you don't have this long range component actually happening?
I see it happening more often than not, but how it functions, I'm not sure. Because it's so
Yeah.
close, I see all the spells just kind of funneled together,
Uh-huh.
and you have 5 different element types just combining into Captain Planet.
Well, that was kind of
Yep.
my thought too. Is I could see, because everyone's so close, I could see a lot of potential for air in some capacity to do some really cool things, but I can't actually think of practical examples.
One thing I would be interested in also is that those more frequent reactions might have different effects while in close range than in long range. For example, a steam wall in open field may be useful,
Meh.
but if you have a huge steam cloud in that small corridor where you're fighting and you don't see shit anymore.
See,
Mhm.
now you're talking about volume in space and whether
Yeah.
that cloud is actually going to be contained by the walls you're in, or just kind of.
It's still,
But also people
go
can't
out.
run
it still
around it,
reduce
though.
the visibility.
Well, and still they can't move around it. So if you can push that into defenders, I think my main issue here is there are some obvious uses for some of the mage spells and air and stuff for defenders, but but the attackers need some capacity to use that as well, or they're going to be outclassed and out advantaged by the defenders, because defenders can position mages to be able to shoot into range. They can summon walls to block off corridors so you can't get through and just keep walling you. Walls don't really help attackers very much.
Well, that's kind of the point of them.
Yeah, and it's hard because, at least for our realm, they're in some of your some of the things you might think about first when you're talking about air is the archer and the flame warden, with fire arrows and things like that. But we're talking about a situation where both those archetypes are suffering in this situation.
Yes.
It's close ranged. So yeah, it starts to become a little tough to find those things without knowing all the other different elements that exist
Yeah.
through all the different archetypes for each realm.
Now, some of the things that have been
a lot of testing anyway.
Now, some of the things that could be done, you've got like air wall. Maybe, if defenders have an ability to use like some kind of air wall or something that could slow advance instead of just stopping people outright, maybe you can overpower that, push it back the other way, and it can actually increase mass and speed for attackers or something. That was about the only useful type of thing I could think of with air. Because then I think of things like, they've talked about being able to melt down other walls into lava. And I'm like, oh, they have that on the stairs and you set yourself on fire. That's helpful.
And one of the problems that we didn't talk about, and Ulvik raises a good point, is collision. Especially for mages that have a long cast time. If you get collision or disruption damage in the middle of your cast, you can't cast. It just interrupts at some point. So that's going to be also an interesting conundrum for mages to be able to be close enough from the action that they can actually be useful, but far enough that they're not useless because of the being interrupted constantly.
Now, the one good thing I've thought of for the ranged attacks in there is if you can get an attack off and you do AoE when you're in these corridor fights and inner keep fights, AoE is going to be much more useful there than it is fighting on the walls or fighting out in a field. Because even if they're smaller, I mean, it's confined space. Everyone's crammed in there as much as they possibly can be.
I'm curious to see how they handle the origin of an AoE spell, as far as where the particles start, if it's a max height or a designated height in world space. This is a little bit of tech talk. If it starts, too high, is it going to start above your wall, your ceiling, and then hit just the top of the ceiling and not come through? Or is it going to just understand that it needs to start lower at a certain point so it comes in just beneath the ceiling and starts having like a rain of fire coming down kind of thing? There's gonna be a lot of playing around with how that works.
Well, and I think it's a good point, because the issue there is a lot of the keeps and everything are player made, so players define how tall that hallway is going to be, whereas if they're designer made, they can go, all hallways are this high to ensure that we can have spells that can get through here. You can't really do that when the players are making the corridors.
There's going to be a lot of line of sight, which is good for both defenders and attackers. With ranged and slower casting spells, it's going to be hard to really hit a specific target when they're dodging in and out of corners and walls, and you're not going to have just this long hallway all the time. But because it is player made, you might in some cases. But you'll probably have a lot of corners and a lot of different directions, hallways twisting and turning, columns to hide behind.
I actually just thought of something that's actually also kind of rough. Stealthers in keep melees. Like, once you actually get inside the house, they're going to be standing behind the heavy fighters like, I want to stab them! I want to stab them! I want to stab them!
Let me go!
You'll know where they are in a group because there'll just be this open spot in the middle of the group with no one there, but no one can get in.
They'll pretty much have to come out of the veil at that point.
Trampled in the middle of the battlefield, the Lutrapens being trampled, and when the fight recedes, you have the corpse of Lutrapens laying the whole floor.
Another type of thing that I thought of as an issue is, and again, they're not combat oriented. But what do crafters do when it gets into the keep fight stage? When they're out in the field, there's at least a few things they can do.
The idea is, and I'm going to speak for Kriss, and guess what he would do is he wouldn't even go into the keep.
Pretty much, exactly. That's the one class that I do not want them to try to figure out a way for crafters to be useful. inside the keep attack. Defenders, yes, because you're going to lay traps and things like that, repair walls, but if your realm is attacking a keep and you're going inside and you die, that's your own damn fault, because you shouldn't be there. You're being a nuisance to your realm mates, because that's one more body they need to go around. So crafters, I would be the first one to chew one crafters off for being there, because they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be in the keep battles. They should be outside, making sure we don't get attacked from the back by reinforcement, by laying traps, manning the siege engines just in case, repairing stuff. But you shouldn't be inside. So no, crafters. I have no problem with crafters not being in battle.
That was going to be my one disagreement with you is crafters can still lay traps. So I can see them going into the keep to lay traps outside the walls to keep people from coming in behind them. But I can also see them following the group, in the keep melee. Say you've taken over a third of the keep or something, and you're still fighting over the keep. I can see crafters coming into the areas you've already taken, laying traps behind in case they try to move around and come in behind you or something from another area of the keep. Yeah. They're going to walk into bear traps and things like that.
But not in the melee, not in the fight itself.
Yeah.
As the backlines, moving back, securing your backlines and making sure you don't get attacked from the back. But fighting, no. I don't want crafters fighting.
But what if they have turrets?
Yeah.
No.
That's a thing, right?
They're not an engineer class. They just engineer.
Well, they're engineers. You've never seen engineers in the middle of a battlefield. They're here before or after, not during the fight. So, no.
Now, I'm going to ask you about a crazy question, just because I know how much you all love this topic. What are the heavy fighters and the melee people going to do in the naval battles?
Oh, jeez.
Manning the cannons.
Yeah, there you go.
They don't like cannons. They don't like doing siege. They're not going to like doing cannons.
There is no doubt going to
be
a ship versus ship fight where they connect and get stuck together and they board the other ship.
Boarding parties.
Gotta have some kind of boarding.
Manning the cannons
they
and
have
then
to row.
parties.
And you better row, otherwise, man the sails, row, and when it's time, you get the boarding party, you hop over to the other ship and stab
Especially
somebody.
the heavy fighters. They
And sink when they fall off the ship.
Or you throw them overboard, and with the heavy armor, they won't swim. They won't swim.
So that was somewhat joking, somewhat not. But are there any other melee combat issues somebody wanted to bring up in serious fashion?
Serious ones.
Or similar serious fashion.
How about chat? Do you guys have any things we haven't talked about that you think are an issue in keeping people engaged?
Not bored. I mean, come on. What are y'all concerned about? I know people have issues with that they fuss about occasionally.
We mostly talked about the sieges, but there's going to be other type of fighting also.
Well, I figure some of that gets mixed. Like the escorting cargo. That's kind of dull for everybody equally until you get into an actual fight, and then you're just basically in a field fight at that point. Travel time through the battlefronts. Oh yeah, we've beaten that to death.
Who fares worse in a Veilstorm, the defenders or techers?
I would suspect nobody.
Equally.
I'm pretty sure Veilstorms are rather neutral.
Yeah.
I think that's the purpose. Yeah,
because they kind of said that the Veilstorm will fuck your walls up just as much when you're in the keep as people that are outside the keep.
Well, that is a good point, though. If your keep is relatively safe from a storm,
yeah,
the defenders have the advantage, and then it makes sense to try to get a storm to be created as a weapon almost.
I would have to say I don't think that's going to be
created inside the keep.
I don't think it's going to be feasible. I don't think keeps are going to protect you at all from the storm. At least not if they go by the lore, because it sounds like the lore, the Veilstorms just do whatever the hell they want and kill everyone regardless of whatever house you're in. They just go through and go, and you're dead anyway, forget you. So
if that's the case, then there is no incentive.
I think of them as more like magical radiation that just sweep through the air and go, screw you all.
Pretty much.
I would hope then
nobody's advantage to trigger a Veilstorm.
Right.
Well, and actually, it's probably the attacker's advantage because they can probably more easily run away.
That's exactly what he was just saying. I would hope then, as a preventative measure for that, because I don't think that would be very fun, is that if a storm is triggered, it's not a slow buildup of it just starting and appearing. It's triggered, here it comes, everyone's about to get.
And that the storm moves faster than you run.
Yeah, and it needs to be unpredictable.
You can't outrun the storm.
I think Veilstorms need to be something that happen relatively quickly, not immediate, but like you can see one coming, but you don't have much time to run away unless you immediately start hauling it, and you don't know where it's going to go. I mean, it's going to summon, and it's just going to stay around and start moving in some direction.
My hope visually for these, maybe not the visuals of the actual storm, but if I'm playing, is you see this animation in the sky or whatever, lightning just ripping holes through time and space. Everyone's reaction at that point should be, I don't care what I'm doing, just stop and run away.
Yes. That's basically what I want Veilstorms to be.
I also think I don't think Veilstorms are going to be something that's easy at all to summon. I think they're only going to happen in the largest battles where there's like literally, 3,000 people out there fighting and stuff.
Well, maybe not 3,000, but
I know.
I'd say 1,000 people's battle. So
just huge battles that are probably more protracted battles, not even quick ones, but the ones where people are like staying out there forever with tons of resources.
And not just that. Battles where you have a lot of magic thrown around.
Exactly.
Right? If it's a purely melee battle, there's no risk for a Veilstorm.
I do think the thing, to go with what Sacrix is saying, I do think that the Veilstorm should be somewhat random in that they are. I don't think, like, if you get hit by the Veilstorm, I think you should die. But just because a Veilstorm is over you doesn't necessarily mean it's going to damage you. I think it should be kind of like in PlayerUnknown Battleground where you got the bombing going on all over the place. It should do things to be like, you die, and you die, and you die. Better than the PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds bombings, because they're crap. And you can just run through the field and never die.
That's not true.
I feel like it should roll through if it rolls through your group, most people are gonna die. But not necessarily everyone is gonna get chosen. Some people may be spared.
I think its effects should also follow the physics system in that there's a chance for you to, if you're looking up, to kind of see what's coming and be able to dodge it.
Maybe
not.
But by being able to dodge, I mean, like, you still have to be lucky because there's so much of it going on that you can't possibly focus on everything coming down on you. But that there's the chance.
And it could be a sort of thing where it summons like veil monsters as well, which then attack
how
people.
Much magic was used.
Yeah.
Because if you have a lot of magic thrown around, it should be a big storm. But yeah,
I also
the storm,
just think Veilstorm should be random things anyway, in addition to people being able to cause them, but sometimes they just happen. And
I do hope that, as far as the ones created by magic, are not able to be data mined as far as being able to know exactly the limits, how to cause them, the numbers needed, or the exact situation needed to produce one.
I think they can kind of combat that by making there be kind of unknown factors that influence them as well. Environmental effects, as you will. Sometimes it's easier to cause a Veilstorm than other times.
They did say that the client will be as dumb as they can make it while not impacting the game. So it's hard to data mine if everything that happens is server side.
Let's see. All right. Is there anything else in chat as a topic?
One thing that I thought that could be also, that's going to be a point of contention because it can be exploited. with the collision and the mass system.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you see a ladder or a siege tower being brought to your walls, if you put your giant race just on top of the ladder, how do they get it off the ladder
They kill
to be
him.
able to finish climbing it?
Well,
He's probably standing out in the open, so a lot of people can shoot him.
Yeah.
it's going to be hard because if there are ladders in the game and you place them on a wall, there's really only two options. One, it's a freeform system where you place it and you let physics determine how it rests against the wall, which means there's a chance for the ladder to rest
Fall.
very poorly against the wall, fall, or just be like at an angle and just completely useless. Or there's an animation for it that how they program it, it's set in place basically for you.
Yeah.
You click, like your function button, E, F, whatever, and it places the ladder in your bag there. There's no animation to it. It's just there. It's like a structure, basically, attached to this wall, in which case getting up and down and whatever race you are should be fairly simple.
Yeah.
And I will say that I think that siege ladders should be fairly easy to stop. If you bring one siege ladder, you prop it up against the wall and you start climbing up there, you're probably going to have a bad time. If you bring 6 or 7 siege ladders and put them up there, it's going to be a little bit easier. So I think there should be tiers is what I'm saying. Like, you have a siege ladder, that's the cheapest, easiest method of getting up the wall. Siege towers are a lot more expensive, but they have a platform so you can just climb up it and then attack.
And they're
you don't need to, and they're protected. So obviously, if you're going to try to climb the walls, I would think you would use a mixture of them anyway if you really are serious about being effective. But for the guy standing on top of the ladder, I mean, he's exposed. He's going to get shot. I would be happy to shoot him for whoever's climbing up the ladder.
But that would be interesting also. I doubt it's going to be done like that because it would be, I don't know, that's a question for Brand, but I don't know how easy it would be to be programmed. But the ladders being actual physical effect and being able to be pushed off the wall so they actually fall off.
Not hard. It's basically like
just making them
physical objects that is affected by mass and inertia, and they have less of it than humans do or characters do because they have no resistance to being moved.
Of course, ladders are kind of hard to push off at that length and that angle.
They're actually really easy to push off. Siege ladders,
I've almost fallen off of them. They are pretty easy to move.
Really easy to push off because you don't have to push them back. You push them to the side.
Yeah.
What you see.
That's why you get the Urukai ladders from Two Towers that have the things that come crashing down.
Because otherwise, you don't push them back like you see in all movies. You push them to the side, and they just slide along the wall.
And that's where your melee characters come in for sieging. Is they have the ladder. Go.
Yeah, inside. Well, they will have. I sure hope so that they will have to push off and to repel the attackers, melee characters that are trying to get in the keep. So I suspect keeps are going to be less of a long range heaven than we suspect, and they're going to be a lot more mixed of melee and ranged combat.
Yeah, I still have to disagree a bit about the tipping of a ladder. For a couple of reasons. One, you've got people on the bottom that are holding the ladder, and while people on the top do have the advantage, you can only get so many people leaning over the wall, grabbing it, and trying to drag it across. Now, I guess they could theoretically grab hold of each other and start trying to drag multiple people with the ladder. But at that point, we're talking about contesting strengths, as well as the weight of people that are actually on the ladder, holding on to it and everything. I'm not saying it's necessarily impossible, just that I could see why they might not put that in the game, because how do you figure out contesting mass and everything at that point? But also, as somebody mentioned, there's also stealth attacks with ladders, trying to switch around to the back of the keep, sneak up with a ladder, and get a couple of people in. That is also a viable thing to do to make sure people are keeping eyes on all sides.
Well, why have ladders if you have siege engines? First, because this way you attack before
Cheaper.
having to take down the wall. They're
Yeah.
much cheaper. They're going to be much cheaper probably to make than siege engines.
And another thing
And
they did
you
mention.
can get inside without breaking the wall. That's the
Another-
one thing that we haven't seen. Well, they tried to do in ESO, but they made it so easy that people break the walls, all the walls, and it's easy to repair.
And
in
Pocket
CU,
brings up a.
If you make the keep you're attacking into the walls of the keep you're attacking into Swiss cheese, it's going to take you forever to repair that.
Yeah.
And you're completely exposed until then. So it might be better to just attack the keep and keep the siege engines for distraction and for keeping the defenders busy while your melee attackers go and get in.
And another thing that was mentioned I believe was mentioned in the Heavy Fighters reveal is, of course, things like grappling hooks and ropes. Things that they certainly didn't confirm, but I think that was the original question was, what about grappling hooks? And they were like, that would be nice to have, and we'd like to do it. At the very least, we would like to have ladders and siege towers. Something like grappling hooks would be cool, which I agree. I mean, if you can have a whole line of people throwing up hooks and climbing, that's going to be a whole level of more annoying to try to stop as they're coming up.
Brings up something relative to that, in that with player-made keeps, we've seen people build some really amazing things. You can build some really tall walls. If you're building a ladder, is it like a default size? If you build a ladder item, it is exactly this height every time you build it. Same with the siege tower. Is that just going to become a thing where once you realize that those only go so high,
it might
you just make all walls taller than that, and they
because
become completely useless?
I don't think. I don't.
Well, there is
know
a build
how,
limit.
Yeah, there is
I'm
a
pretty
build
sure
limit.
it's taller than a ladder.
Yes,
Potentially,
but
yeah.
then you might have, if you're building your walls super tall, you might not have enough block limit to make them super thick.
But I could see that being more of a problem with siege towers when you're using like a siege ladder. I could see how that might be something that they could make adjustable. Not that the ladder itself would be slidable or anything, but as it moves up and does the animation, they could probably fudge it and go, okay, this wall is yay high. It can adjust at least a little bit to match up to the wall. Where the siege tower, that's definitely more of a problem because, how does the siege tower just automatically suddenly gets taller? That's probably pretty noticeable. If it just shoots up an extra foot and gains stairs
or if you have multiple ladders, you use one, then use another one on top of that, and another one on top of that, and you just
But with
build
like
up.
a siege tower can have like an adjustable ramp that can go up and down several feet. Maybe it has to slope down or it can slope up or something from the top. Kind of like a mini siege ladder. It just goes plink and clicks on.
Yeah.
Because there is a build limit for the walls.
And
Rhaegar
there
says
will
Q's
be
freeform presently, but won't be later. And it's
but
true.
that's for physics and build limits, but that doesn't impact the siege engines that we don't know anything about aside from the Scorpion and the catapults. I think they showed, but so far that's all we've seen.
And there's definitely a cap for how tall things can be.
But
Cube.
I suspect sappers
Cube,
and getting your melee fighters inside the keep is going to be the priority rather than just taking down half the walls to be able to storm the keep. You will need to just infiltrate it. And I think that we haven't seen much of any mechanics that they're planning on putting in any other game. So what we're basing ourselves on is games that had a lot of flaws, like ESO for the sieging, that are not going to be there. It will have its flaws, but they're not going to be there. But at the same time, they will probably make it so that you, and I hope so at least, that you will have to either come out or get in the keep to actually take it effectively, rather than just spending 5 hours lobbing rocks at them or
Right.
fireballs at them or things like that. You
Yeah.
will have to get inside. So yeah.
For the sim reasoning that Mark has for stun classes or
Mhm.
classes with the stun, in that he absolutely hates the idea of a player being unable to do anything.
Mhm.
I'm sure they will make adjustments to systems or the balance of things to make it so that a style of play doesn't feel completely useless doing something in the game.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I did want to we've had a good conversation. This episode's drawing out kind of long.
Yeah.
So I think this is a pretty good place to end it for the recording and everything. So as usual, we'll hang out for a bit afterwards anyway to answer some more of these questions and talk about stuff. But thanks everybody for coming out, hanging out, commenting, all of that stuff. Video will be up on YouTube soon, so if you're on YouTube, well, thanks for checking that out. Otherwise, send it to people or something, you know.
Yeah.
So we will have another episode most likely in 2 weeks. I noticed I might have an issue with that, but we'll figure that out. If we do, we'll let y'all know as usual.